21st-century world, if there are two words that have become more than synonymous than ever, are stress and corporate. If you just look around, look within, then stress has become so associated with corporate world that mental well-being has gone for a toss. Every time you interact with a corporate employee, the first thing that we hear from them is a rant or a complaint that the mental sanity is not in place. To kickstart the conversation on mental well-being in the corporate spaces, today we have Mr. Vivek Varma, who has been finance director for Thomson Reuters in the past and currently serving as leadership coach for leading corporates as well as institutions, most notably Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, Shillong, and many more. And this conversation has been brought to you by skillaidempowerindia Foundation as a part of a podcast series titled SAEIFSide. So, Mr. Vivek, we'll start with the conversation by asking the very first question, like, why is there so much of stress in corporate?
So first of all, thank you for inviting me to talk about this very important topic. A lot of people in today's corporate world, as you mentioned, complain about burnout, stress, the inability to manage work-life balances. And it's very difficult to pinpoint one specific aspect of what really contributes to stress. In my opinion, there are a few topics, there are a few instances, few themes that if we aggregate, that really helps us understand what is causing stress. In no specific order, the first one that comes to my mind is all about the constant change that happens in the corporate world today. Because of the business changes, the dynamics that keep changing, ever-evolving business scenarios, there are a lot of times that the institutions and the corporates have to either proactively or as a response to any business situation, keep the organization changes, which means that they have to reorganize, re-strategize, and it creates a lot of insecurity in the minds of employees. They're not sure how their role is going to look like in the new structure, what the new structure is going to look like for them, and at times even the management themselves are struggling to find out the right answers. In spite of their best intent, the best conduct, they're not able to provide that clarity to the employees of how the new structure is going to look like for them, what it really means for the employees. And this is one big reasons that employees are constantly under pressure, they are constantly under stress, trying to evaluate and figure out how their roles are going to shape out in the new structure. If we look at some of the other things, it is also related to the advent of artificial intelligence in today's world. Whether we like it or not, there is a difference of opinion, people have views for and against, but the reality is AI is going to stay.
For sure.
For sure. And how do we best embrace and acknowledge AI is, in my view, one of the important challenges for all of us in corporate. As organizations are keeping a pace to understand what AI means for them, for their business, for their customers, it is also equally important for the employees to understand how AI is going to impact their individual jobs. A lot of skills that were relevant earlier is likely to become redundant over the next 2-3 years with the advent of AI.
That's right.
And this again creates a lot of stress on people's mind of understanding what it means for them. Whether they are going to continue to remain relevant in the corporate world, or are there chances that they might have to switch over to the other roles. So the changing technology, it is expected, the organizations expect that people should be able to embrace new technology very quickly and should be able to adapt and start working with that. But as you're aware, humans take a little time. Change is the ever constant, but as humans, we take some time to get adjusted to the new change. So we are risk averse, we are change averse as nature, and that takes some time. And a lot of organizations really do not have that appetite to allow that much time for the employees to really cope up with those changes in the new technology and AI. So in my view, that is another big factor in today's corporate world, which constantly puts a lot of pressure on the employees.
Got it. So if you just point out from your recent response that it's the AI and the ever dynamic nature of the organizations, because they are themselves trying to grapple up with the changes that the world is bringing, that is causing a huge amount of stress. So can you just say that as this change is coming from the outside and the new workforce that is stepping into the picture is the Gen Z. And being a Gen Z myself and using and seeing the Instagram reels, we see that Gen Z is most notoriously known as the employer's nightmare, because they are well adaptive to the changes, but the way they are coping up is not as healthy, and they are the ones which have reported the highest instance of not so good health of their mind. So can we say that outside world is impacting the Gen Z stress more, or what? How do you picturize this new workforce entering, new kind of changes happening, and the way forward?
Quite an interesting question, Manya, and thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah.
Gen Z have a very different way of looking at work and workplace. And to be fair, I won't try to categorize whether it is good, bad, right, or wrong. I would rather take a step back and, as management, as leaders, try to really understand their perspective of how they look at it. In conventional ways, leadership was a top driven approach where everybody looked up at their leaders. I believe leadership is a service leadership model.
Yeah.
Where the leader is at the bottom of the pyramid, where their role is to provide support to their teams, to their stakeholders and their customers. So continuing on that analogy, I feel it is important for today's managements in the corporate and leaders specifically, where they need to really understand what is the thought process, what is the psyche of the Gen Z, what really works for them. Things that had worked in the past with conventional employees may not be relevant in today's world. So if we continue to be inflexible in our approach towards Gen Z, there are chances of conflict that we keep hearing a lot. However, I feel if there is a balance between acknowledging the thought process of Gen Z, but also emphasizing the importance of some of the conventional ways of working, I believe we can create a lot more harmonious balance between Gen Z and the management. Because the way Gen Z looks at job is very different.
That's completely true.
They don't really look in the horizon of 3 years, 5 years and 10 years. And rather than trying to challenge that, I believe it is important for us to acknowledge that their views are equally important. And how do we really customize the job offerings? How do we create a culture in the organizations that somehow aligns with their thought process, where they feel valued, and most importantly, how do they feel a sense of purpose of working in an organization, in my view, is going to resolve that conflict. So,
indeed, I think that organizations need to evolve with the new workforce that is entering, and on the other side, it is the technological and other dynamic changes that are happening. So it's like two-way sides, which is a balance that the organizations need to finely tune so that both have a successful marriage for a progress. Now, this brings to mind that whenever we interact with the employees like the Gen Z, of course, organizations take their own time to evolve the structures and procedures, because this has been the way they have been working in the past. But whenever we hear from the people, it's like कि हमारा leader खराब है, हमारा manager खराब है, उसकी वजह से हमें stress होता है, and it is not me who is responsible, but the structures. Structures take their time to change, but how do we navigate कि boss खराब है? So is it always like the stress is outside or within the factors that we put on?
Again, great question, Manya. So there is no easy answer to pinpoint that all the managers are responsible for creating those stress in minds of employees. But I feel, to link to the earlier point, leadership traits, the way you can be an effective leader in today's world is slightly different of how it was considered, let's say, 10 years back. So over the decade, leadership itself has evolved. And it is important that leaders should be able to adopt a very flexible approach to really customize their leadership that addresses the needs of the employees. Because if we continue to have a very rigid approach as leaders, then there are chances that our thought process, our values could be very different from Gen Z. And that's a reality. If you look people around us in our own families, today's generation thinks about things very differently. So how do we really create that balance? How do we make sure that we are able to create a nice blend of conventional values, but also recognizing and acknowledging the Gen Z's aspirations? I feel there can be slight changes that we can make in our leadership style. So some of the challenges that I keep hearing when I speak to a lot of leaders in corporate and a lot of employees is the unrealistic timelines. There is a lot of pressure on employees because the managers tend to push all those pressures onto their employees. Now it is important to understand that not everything that is important is going to be urgent. So it's a good habit for the manager and the leader to really prioritize and then manage the workload of their teams. Because if they keep pushing everything, saying everything is important, it needs to be done in a very short span of time, it is likely to create a burnout.
That's true.
If we can take an analogy to relate it with how we strategize in sports. If you're planning to run a 100-meter sprint as compared to running a marathon, obviously the strategy is going to be different.
Completely.
But if we try to run a marathon using the strategy of a 100-meter sprint, I'm sure, in spite of the best capability, best behavior, and best practice, the athlete is going to tire out after 300 meters, 400 meters, or 500 meters. So it is important, and that's what I'm trying to link, that if we have a set of activities that needs to be performed, I feel the manager needs to be very clear in their mind of how they need to prioritize, so that they allow their team some breathing space as well. Because if we keep pushing things, all the targets are important, they have to be done in a short turnaround time, chances are over a period of time people will really start losing the significance of time sensitivity.
Yeah.
So that is one element. The other is the lack of complete, in today's world, as I mentioned, with a lot of technology change, the ever-changing business scenarios, there are instances where the management or the organizations are also navigating through some muddy waters.
Yeah.
So how do as leaders we are able to still provide that inspiration to our team is a reflection of good quality leadership.
That's so true. I think that what you're speaking highlights so importantly your role as a leadership coach and ripened by 32 years of experience, that how leadership is crucial in like ensuring employee sanity. So if I were to like ask you like what should an ideal leader look like? With this, of course I got to know about time management, like providing the employees that buffer zone to design their time and space. So how do you picturize an exact leader, or if you can just provide certain examples of leaders you adore, of maybe employees in organizations where they have remarkable leadership, maybe yourself or your example. What does make a good leader in today's time?
I feel there are multiple qualities of a good leader, but very difficult to define, but very easily recognized. So a good leader is easily recognized by the teammates, by the stakeholders. I'm a strong advocate of the service leadership model that I spoke about, where conventionally it was thought that if we were to look at a triangle, then the leader was always at the top, where everybody in the organization, their teams, their stakeholders were trying to support them, the leaders, to become more successful and effective. However, I feel it's just the other way around, where the leader is at the bottom of the pyramid, where the role of a leader is to act as an enabler, where they try to provide the right support to their team, and it could be in terms of being empathetic leaders, so that they are sensitive to the needs of employees. Because we also need to realize that each one of us as employees have our own performance drivers, which could be different from my other colleague.
That's completely true. Some may be driven by purpose, some other by the packages, some other by colleagues. So yeah, great.
And if I were to be very inflexible as a leader and trying to motivate everybody using the same approach, chances are I'm not going to really be an effective leader. Similarly, my stakeholders, every stakeholder, every customer is unique, and I as a leader should be sensitive and be aware of how I'm going to interact with each of those leaders, my teammates, so that I can provide the right platform, the right support. And I feel leaders who act as enablers, it's a very crucial and sensitive word, but I really admire that word, that as leaders, if we act as enablers to help our teams perform better, chances are people will be able to hear my purpose.
Definitely.
There is a nice, so Simon Sinek has very beautifully explained using the concept of a golden circle, where he says that organizations which are driven by purpose, where people, they are able to relate of what their purpose is, it's more likely that the customers will be able to resonate with that marketing message, their vision. And similarly, as leaders, if I can relate with my employees, help them understand the purpose of why I'm asking them to do something, then chances are they will be able to really understand their contribution in the overall objective of the organizations. So acting as an enabler, a catalyst, allows the leader to be more empathetic, because then he understands or she understands that what is the right approach required for which individual under what circumstances.
Now that speaks about the customized model of leadership for employees and tilts a focus to employees more than just employees, but as human beings which are contributing to organization's purpose.
Absolutely.
Because I think that just goes against the very perspective which we used to follow in the olden times, that naukri karni hai, naukar banne ka jo title hota tha. But today it's like we need to shift the dynamic and the mindset. We need to respect the individual as a contributor to the mission.
It's a saying which says people forget what you say, but people always remember how you make them feel.
That's so rings true.
The emotions, the experience is what gets etched in people's memory. And that is what really drives behavior of employees, customers and stakeholders. So as long as our leaders, as you mentioned, can treat each of our employees as human beings first before they consider them as employees, their approach, I'm sure, will be quite different from what they adopt today.
That's so true. And like we were discussing about this customized model of for each and every employee. But if I just look at organizations where there is so much to do, as we discussed, there are dynamic changes and there's a lot on the shoulders of the leaders themselves. Because if I have to customize my leadership कि इसके साथ ऐसे बात करनी है, उसके साथ वैसे करनी है, मान्या को ये पसंद है, आर्यन को ये पसंद है, then how do we create that bandwidth or the space for a leader to keep in mind these customized things? Because if you talk about Indian organizations, leaving apart the MNCs, huge chunk of them are still by the Lala company title. कि यही काम होते आ रहा है, ऐसे ही डील करेंगे और ऐसे ही चलता जाएगा. So how do we create that maybe kind of insular cells within own, like individuals to sustain their own mental sanity in their own hands? So how do we shift the onus only from the leader to the employees that we want to become?
Right. I can probably word your question slightly differently, saying that how do we help our employees to be more resilient? That's
In very succinct terms, correct. Yes.
So it's a combination of multiple things. As I mentioned, employees need to take complete ownership of their own well-being. If we continue to look up at management, our leaders, there is only so much they can do about it.
Yeah.
And if we continue to shirk away that responsibility, that at the end of the day it is my own responsibility, it is my own well-being. And hence, there are few things that as individuals we should also be very clearly focused upon. Now, there is a big debate always in the corporate world about work-life balance. What really is work-life balance?
What is it exactly?
And I will not delve into it because it is likely to get into a very different tangent. But for me, work-life balance means that I have that flexibility. That I can work where it is required, but I can also take some time off. I can switch off and recharge myself when I get that opportunity. Now, it may work differently for different people. Doesn't mean that you only have to work 8 till 5 every day. We are all incorporated with one of the important objectives is also maximize the wealth of the organization for the shareholders, for the management, for our stakeholders, and hence you cannot underestimate the value of financials.
Completely.
But does financials are the only way of measuring the success of an organization? I don't think so. And that's where, as employees, if we are able to really align our objectives, our own working methods with how I can contribute to the overall success of the organization, I'm sure there will be a lot of harmony in how we work and how I can provide support to my management. As I mentioned, it is also for the leader to acknowledge and allow that flexibility so that employees feel empowered. That empowering is a very important notion in the mind of today's employees, where they feel that they have the flexibility to be creative.
Flexibility, that's the most kind of luring trait I think the Gen Zs take in the organizations today.
And they want to be creative, they don't want to be bound by rules, as you mentioned. So it is also for the employees, and few basic things that we keep reading about and we keep hearing our parents, our seniors talk all the time, is about how do we create more discipline in our life. It is important in today's world where a lot of focus is on the digitization. We spend a lot of time on digital networks. It is also important for each of us to consciously take ownership that I want to limit my screen time. In today's world, we have moved from social engagements, the ability to talk to people in person, to using messages, WhatsApp, Instagram, whatever. So there is slight shift in the way the social structure, the social setup is today.
That it just becomes so fragmented that there is no such social identity, social cohesion that we can expect in organizations.
And a lot of it has to be owned by the employees, because as individuals. If I really am very particular and interested, keen in my well-being, both mental and physical, then I need to lead a little more disciplined lifestyle. I should be able to actually consciously take out time, meet people, so that I have the right social support system around me, which helps me create that emotional resilience that we spoke about. Because a lot of time, when post-COVID, that has become very prominent, that people are spending a lot of time only on electronic gadgets and the social media at the cost of their actual conventional relationships. The face-to-face meetings, having a conversation with your friend, colleague, parent is gradually disappearing today. And that adds a lot of insecurity in the minds of employees as individuals today. Because I start feeling insecure, I start feeling unsafe, I'm not very confident because I'm not speaking with people, and I start isolating myself, which creates a lot of depressing thoughts.
That's true, and so I think that what this discussion brought out is the sense of discipline, and work-life balance can come only when the balance also asks for some amount of discipline. So this brings to me, like, if you can have certain anecdotes from your journey as a leadership coach, when you coach someone from the sense of having no discipline to maybe discipline and some betterment in their mental sanity, if you can cite any from your experience,
Sure.
or maybe with the coaches that you've had.
A lot of them, Anya, I'm not going to take names, but
Yeah.
the very interesting part is that I'm very careful of using the word discipline, especially with today's Gen Zs.
Yeah.
Because the moment you talk about discipline, they get offended.
Yeah.
So it is more about using a messaging which helps them to understand of what are the benefits of leading a structured life.
Yeah, structures, and because no one wants structure actually, they just want that the concept of settling down, structures, and they just seem to limit them, and they just want to be free and
Yes. So the idea that I understood, and a lot of it goes to my own conversations with my daughter as she was going through her teens. And I realized that in spite of my best intent, the moment I used to talk about discipline, she used to really get upset about it.
I can say.
And as a coach myself, I took a step back and really evaluated my own way of communicating. And I understood that there are certain things that really, with the best intent, in spite of best intent, are being taken otherwise. So to answer your question, it is important, as I talk to a lot of corporate employees, I've been doing coaching for the last 10-15 years now. And I have been privileged to work both with very senior leaders as well as a lot of dynamic leaders from the Gen Z generation. But it is all about customizing the coaching. And the important factor is all about helping them understand that a framework helps. And it is all about putting some very basic conversations in place where you talk about that if I have to decide about everything, if I really don't plan out certain things, not everything, but balancing out that creativity, that flexibility that today's Gen Z always demands, but also help them understand that if I continue to decide everything that I have to do, it takes a lot of pressure, and it puts me under a lot of pressure because my brain has to decide all the time. For example, when I'm going to eat today, what should I have for lunch and for dinner? A lot of Gen Z leaders today leave it saying, I'm going to decide when the lunch time comes. And the chances are they will be caught up in multiple things, there will be varieties, and they just suddenly realize they don't have time left to order for lunch. And they skip lunch. And then because they have not eaten, suddenly their body starts responding, craving for food, and not being able to manage, they end up getting frustrated. So which reflects in their behavior. If they can plan out in the morning saying I'm going to have this thing for breakfast, I'm going to have lunch around 2 o'clock so that I can place an order at 1 o'clock, which takes away a lot of pressure at that sensitive point when you're focusing on something very important. And this is one thing that people are able to relate, saying yes, it is a no-brainer. I can definitely do it in the morning to decide what I'm going to have for lunch and breakfast, so that during those times I don't really have to decide. So let me maximize my muscle memory to an extent where I don't have to use my actual deciding powers all the time, because the more I have to decide, it takes more resources out of my own emotional energy.
That's so true. I mean that what you're pointing out in this conversation so far is that we need to go back to the values to tackle with the stress and the well-being aspect. Because as you were saying that Gen Z has totally fallen off the radar of these values of patience, discipline, focus.
True. And it is not going to get overnight. So we have to be patient as leaders and coaches as well. So my approach with, let's say, a very senior executive is going to be completely different from how I'm going to coach, let's say, a 30-year-old entrepreneur from a startup. But it is also important for them to understand that how some of the habits that they have created, some of the way they work, the way they are living in today's world is going to impact their health in the overall scheme of things. For example, less and less people are actually getting into exercises. People don't read today, everything is in electronics. How much do we really spend time on social media is again a question for all of us, not only for Gen Z but for me as well.
Agreed.
And if I'm not very conscious about limiting the time, I can scroll through those social media reels endlessly and realizing that I've really not gained anything. So if I can consciously take out time that in a day I'm going to spend 15 minutes to to exercise, walk, and it could be anything. It's not necessarily that you have to hit the gym 4 days or 5 days a week. It is about identifying that this is one thing that I'm going to do every day. I'll get up in the morning, I'll sit in the fresh air for 5-6 minutes to the extent your time schedule permits. But those are small things small habits. The first initial steps towards your well-being is the ownership of us as individuals.
That's true. I think that requires a lot of proactiveness from employees' end to design a schedule, and from leaders' end to respect that kind of schedule and just create some kind of space that both the dynamics are in successfully together. So this brings to question, like, how do we start to inculcating these habits? Because of course you cannot erase like 20-25 years of conditionings with which employees step into the picture.
True.
Because if we just see the parenting styles, and even the parents are on the mobile phones and they are grown up in that culture, we are called as digital natives. So how do we start that? Maybe a stepped procedure if you can lay down for corporates as well as for employee side.
I read a book. I am very fond of reading books because I believe that's the best source of a lot of information. And one of the sentences that I remind myself every day is 1,000 miles journey starts with a single step. A lot of us make plans so extravagant that we are reluctant to start off with those plans. The Nike ad is very beautiful, which says just do it. So don't spend endless time in planning. Start taking those small steps today. So if I decide that I want to start walking from tomorrow? Why can't I do it today? So I'll take 2 or 3 minutes out of my busy schedule, maybe in an office. A lot of people I know, and including myself, I used to take calls while standing up. So that way I was consciously making sure that I was physically active, not sitting on my desk for 14 hours every day. So it is just about starting rather than thinking about it. At times we just need to break that barrier and start doing something. And once I'm able to break that barrier, I feel a lot more motivation. I feel good about it. Because when it's said, research says that as we exercise, as we interact with people, there are positive hormones that gets secreted in our body, which helps us to feel good about it, we feel happy, and it's a virtual circle. So the more I do these kind of activities, the better I feel, and which elevates my energy levels and my mental state as well. So the point is all about start to do rather than thinking to do. So small steps in this direction can really create the discipline that we spoke about, but most importantly also break that 25 years of the mental seasoning or conditioning that has been done. So, but it requires a lot of willpower, and that's why I believe that our social support system, our family, friends, colleagues can play an important role initially to make sure that they push us to start doing things that we have committed ourselves.
That's true. Just do it. I think
Just
that would be the mantra for like just start out with one thing. If it is about your well-being, then why not just start with the gym? Or maybe I just read in the morning there was a LinkedIn post which said that 30 minutes, just 30 minutes. One slide was showing that scrolling is just 30 minutes and running is just 30 minutes. So it's about your choice at the end of the day.
It's not about don't start, don't stop. Just do it is what I tell people.
Yeah, just do it. Wow. And that's I think towards the conclusion that we can tilt towards this conversation, and in any ways you would like to maybe just summarize the conversation, because for me the takeaways is to simply that stress is not simply caused by factors around us or within us. I think it is the state of the scenarios that we are living into because of the dynamism. And what I have gathered from your wealth of insights is basically designing a systemic approach towards work life. So if you can just share your final concluding thoughts on maybe the theme that we were into conversation.
Sure. I would encourage each one of us to be kind to ourselves. At times I feel we are too tough on ourselves. We really don't recognize the efforts that we put in. We are happy to applaud somebody else's efforts, but we are very harsh on ourselves. So my closing thought with all of you is going to be kind to yourself. Appreciate things that you have done. Feel good about it. You should celebrate small successes in life as well, which will help you to feel a lot better than what you have been doing. And start taking small steps. Take ownership of your own well-being. Don't try to look at other people. Start doing, and I'm sure you will get the right support. So be kind to yourself. Focus on your own health, because if you are healthy, both mentally and physically, it's only then you'll be able to really cherish the luxuries of life.
That's so well said. I mean, that be kind to yourself And being kind is such an umbrella term, because when you're kind to yourself, it means giving respect, time to the human being that you are, rather than just a machine
True.
or a cog in the wheel for that. So thank you so much for your wealth of insights. I mean, I'm taking a lot myself of starting out and making things work, and even just like one insight that just tricked me over here when you were saying that once you start respecting your own self, then others also start respecting you, because you create a role model self
Sure.
which leaders can create for employees to emulate.
Absolutely.
And I think that you've already set an example, that leadership by example is what I can sense from this conversation.
Okay.
And thank you so much for your time. And if anyone is interested, you are interested in taking SAR's guidance and leadership coaching yourself, then sir, how can viewers maybe contact you?
You can reach out to me on my Instagram page. My Instagram page reads by what makes you a leader. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. You can search for Vivek Varma SAEIFSide. I run my own company for leadership coaching. You can always get in touch with me, and I'll be more than happy to take your questions and help you in whatever way I can.
Perfect. I'll be listing out the Instagram as well as LinkedIn links for sir
Sure.
in the comment box. And we hope to stay connected and have you more in joining us for our community sessions at Skill Aid Empowering India Foundations that you have done in the past. And if you're interested in this conversation and wish to hear us further, to hear our people from different walks of life, then do like this video and subscribe to the channel. And this was with us, SAEIFSide plus Skill Aid Empowering India Foundation.
Have a,
Namaste.
have a wonderful day ahead.